Cheers.
Cheers.
It's almost like whiskey or something.
What up, all you dwarves, elves, and wizards? Welcome back to another episode of Sweet Sweet Fantasy. I'm Matt. This is Anne. And what are we doing this week?
This week we're doing Night Watch.
Woo, woo, woo.
I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite books ever. Do you mind if I introduce it?
No, introduce it.
Okay. This is one of my favorite books ever. I don't reread a lot, like as a rule, but this book I've read several times.
Wow, several.
Yeah, probably honestly, this was probably like my 9th or 10th pass through it. And it was funny reading it because I felt like this time through, I was like, all right, put your thinking cap on. And I think I read it with like a middle school English teacher perspective because the things I picked out were very like, how is the characterization done? And like, is this conflict internal or external? I don't know why, but I was thinking about Mrs. Mosher when I was reading it this time. You know, keep things professional for the podcast.
Yeah.
So the book came out originally in 1998 in Russian. The author's name is Sergei Lukyanenko. What did you think about it?
Oh, man.
Pressure's on since I just said it's like my favorite book.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
In the beginning, I thought it was very good. Like when it first started out, I was like, oh boy, we're in for a ride here. And then as the story went on, I thought it was a little bit repetitive for me in terms of like what the resolution would be every time. Because there would be all these things happening and then always turned out to be just the boss, like trying to like mechanize everything to whatever his whim was. Like that was always what the ending of the story was.
Yep.
You know, it's always like, well, it turned out that it was just the boss, you know, trying to whatever, you know, manipulate things this way and that way. And that's what it was every time. It wasn't even like it was a conflict between light and dark. It was just the boss like pulling pawns the whole time.
Yeah,
know?
That's true.
Every single time. I mean, those 3 stories, and spoiler alert, that's what happens every time.
I kind of forget there's another like 5 or 6 books in this series.
I wonder if it just keeps happening.
Yeah, and there's actually, when I read this book, I realized there's 2 books that I wasn't aware of. Like I'd stopped reading the series, but there's 2 more now. So yeah, I wonder if that's just the theme. Like crafty old Gassar.
Yeah, right. And another thing is that it said that the guy was educated as a psychologist, and that made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because it was very much the character just being in his own head, just thinking. You almost felt like you were like a psychology patient from reading the book. Because he would just be like, there was very little action when compared with the amount of time he was thinking about what could be happening. You know what I mean? Like there's many, many pages of him just being like, well, what if they want... Maybe like Zebulon is doing this just so Svetlana could do this, but maybe this is what it is. And it's like literally just a person sitting there like thinking out all these scenarios. And of course none of them would be true because it was just the boss the whole time.
Yeah, definitely the book is very much towards the internal conflict.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that I really like. And I think the first time I read this book, I was like 19 or 20, and I also really liked the idea of this whole secret universe happening, and that people are totally unaware of. Because I think when you're young, you feel like you are part of the secret world, and you're like, why doesn't anybody see these atrocities happening, or these things that are so beautiful? Like life is very intense at that time, and like very colorful and light and dark, and it feels very. Everything is very dramatic. So I think that's why I got kind of hooked on this material. Yeah.
No, I thought the premise was really good, and I definitely think the stories all started very well. Like, I was like, wow. Like, the beginnings of the stories were my favorite part every time.
Yeah, because the premise is really fascinating, and then...
It is.
It ends up just being... kind of like a Scooby-Doo style plot.
Oh, it's a Scooby-Doo, yeah, pretty much. But no, yeah, there's a lot of really cool things going on. I love the fact that they go into the twilight. That was really interesting.
That was one thing I wanted to talk about. It was about how, because it's an urban fantasy. It's set in like present day, or at the time present day Moscow, and urban fantasy is not my favorite. And I would love some suggestions. that are good examples of it, but I feel like usually urban fantasy involves like a bat cave or a billionaire's mansion, and I just am like not interested in that stuff. Like I want swords and horses and a verdant field. But I thought like the way that he used really vivid magical imagery to enhance this very bland setting in Moscow made it come alive. And the twilight was really cool. Like you go in the twilight and it's foggy and gray, and also
Moving
there's
in slow motion.
Yeah, like moss is growing. Do you have dreams where you can't, like your mind moves really fast but your body is stuck?
That's happened to me before, yeah.
I have those dreams I have dreams like that all the time. So the twilight felt like being in that dream world where you're like, I'm processing a million things at once, but my body is so slow.
Yeah. All of the magic in the book was really cool. And it was also kind of like almost the magic. It's not like he set the boundaries of the magical world to begin with. He kind of just revealed little things as you went along. So as a reader, you never really knew what you were dealing with, because there'd be like a new aspect to the magic like every 5 seconds, you know? Like, oh, by the way, people can like save weather, and that's something that they can do. Oh, not only that, but like, you know, yeah, just always going and going and going, where I feel like with most fantasy, like you kind of understand the magic almost even towards the beginning.
Yeah.
You know? And this one you still don't get it because he could just make it up. It actually does feel like he makes it up as he goes along with the magic. Like he's like, ooh, I need another like plot point here. Like what if I had them be able to do this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes into like how do I keep coloring this setting in ways that are interesting? Because like the first time you see the twilight, it's just hazy and gray, and then he adds to it the plants, and then he adds to it that's in slow motion. So like it gradually gets more interesting to like imagine that. And yeah, the capturing weather or just like capturing a scene and being able to recreate it, that was really cool. Also the like the people's auras. That's kind of like a visual element to the magic.
Yeah.
And the curses. I loved the idea that people have these, like an actual black cloud over their head.
That was my favorite part.
That attracts like crows and bad things, and anybody can throw a curse. That was so cool.
The first story I thought was the strongest in general. Just the most like realized. Because like, yeah, it just made like perfect sense the whole time. And it was a cool twist, even though I think I caught it. Probably most people catch it before it's revealed that the only person cursing Svetlana is herself. Like you like come to that conclusion as a reader. It's not like an M. Night Shyamalan twist or anything, but you like it's still really, really cool. And just the image of her with the giant typhoon vortex over her head. But what was cool about it is when Anton comes to talk to her, you don't understand why it's shrinking when he's talking to her at first. And then you're like, oh, it's because like she just needs to feel less hatred towards herself, and that's how it's going to go away.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
That was beautiful. And I think that the story couldn't have worked except as an urban fantasy, because I think when you have like a world that's set in the past, there's all these other conflicts you have to contend with. Like if you get cut off from your friends or your job and you have nothing on you, like you have to contend with survival, and he didn't really have to do that in this book. And that was a good choice, because it was about like his relationship with Svetlana and how he fit in with his boss. Like if it had been set in any other scenario, there would have been like a whole other lot of stuff going on the outside.
Right, yeah.
So I thought that was really cool, because I've never read a book where I thought like it would be better set in a modern day. And the technology isn't like technology. I think it's like hard to have misunderstandings when you can just call somebody on the phone, or I mean, like why didn't he just ask his boss what was going on? But like I think they do a good job of portraying this like sort of 1980s style office where there's like a pit full of people typing on typewriters, and then his boss is at like a whole nother level. It's not like a millennial office. No. Where everyone's on beanbags together.
Well, yeah, because that time didn't happen yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I did like the mundane office life. That was cool. Because they were just like, yeah, we're all like warlocks and stuff, but it just makes more sense to have like a fiscal manager.
Yeah, we still need to pay our rent.
Yeah, we still need to pay our rent. Yeah, I loved that. That was really cool.
It was cool.
Yeah. When they're like, guess what? Like, we got some new bonuses because we're doing like well, financially, so everyone can like have more like vacation time or whatever. I was like, hell yeah, they got new like dental coverage or whatever,
Way to go, Wizards.
Yeah, it's like just manufacture some money out of thin air if you can like keep the weather. If you can save the weather, you can like manufacture a couple bucks, I would think.
They're not allowed to do that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we should say this episode is brought to you by Anton and Olga's favorite drink to share together.
That's cognac.
Some cognac. There was another part of the book where they drank a dark beer with plum wine inside it.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's like, we'll do the cognac instead.
Oh man, it would have been great to put that together though. I bet that tastes great.
You think so? I think it tastes like a headache, but it's concerns for tomorrow.
Yeah. No, you know what it would taste like? It would taste like a chocolate covered like plum.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right, yeah, that's not bad.
Because the plum wine would be like really sweet and like syrupy.
Yeah.
In this instance.
All right.
Yeah.
We're both professional bartenders, by the way. So.
True.
Let's talk about light and dark.
Okay.
Because I thought that was really cool too, the way they set it up to be very, very different. Mm-hmm. Like initially you think like they're just matters of like you're splitting hairs.
Kind of in the way the Good Omens did it.
Yeah, like the organizations function in the same way, but I think by the end of the book it's clear that there's a very different imperative for both sides.
Well, right. Well, they even actually lay it out really cleanly in a passage about what the differences are, in that the dark just wants to gain for itself and itself alone. Mm-hmm. Like they'll do whatever as long as it benefits them. It doesn't matter. Like they can go into some place and like kill a bunch of dogs or whatever, but if it helps their side, then awesome.
Yeah.
And the light is less concerned about themselves and more concerned about the welfare of others. And that was kind of what the distinction was, I thought, at least.
Yeah, and it was interesting that it seemed like dark took away and light couldn't really add. Mm-hmm. Like because if they made somebody's life good without them earning it, that's not what they were supposed to do. But they were there. They had to like have this horrible job of having all of this power, and all they could do was stop someone from doing something bad. Right.
The whole treaty thing was actually really interesting too, because it's like, is this a war? Is this a war? Like, what's happening? It's like, you ever hear that story about in World War I, how the two sides, like during Christmas or something, they literally stopped fighting and had a soccer game and like showed each other pictures of like their family and stuff, and then once the holiday was over, they got back in the trenches and started lobbing grenades at each other again. So it kind of like reminds me like of that, because it's like, what, is it a war or is it not a war? I'd be like, oh well, according to the treaty, it's almost like they're going through the motions. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, well, we let you have this offense, so we get an offense too. It's almost like, I don't know, like the rules are like some playground game or something,
Yeah, it's...
Like the dark was never that dark.
No.
And the light was never really that light either.
Right. They didn't do anything good, and the darkness was like...
It was like they had office jobs. That's what it was like.
Yeah.
It was like you're going to your boring like marketing job, and that's what the feel of like fighting the light versus dark war was.
It's like, do a little bit of evil today.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I'm going to prank call some people.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, we got to clear. Like, I don't know. Is this in accordance with like Chapter 8 of the treaty,
Yeah.
I have to like ask the boss first, Oh, and yeah, I remember how like whenever like there's like some big operation going on, they send an observer from the other side.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
And they're just chatting, It doesn't seem like amongst the workers there's a lot of like animosity. It's not hard to deal with somebody.
And that happened all the time. Whenever new people would get initiated, they'd be like, yeah, like fuck the darkness. Let's get it. And all the ones that have been around for a while are just like, nah, they're not that bad.
Oh, that's Elisa. No, she's cool. We had we had Christmas together.
Yeah. No, they're pretty cool. Yeah, we bowl together or whatever.
Yeah, my neighbor's a vampire.
Yeah.
Like,
literally.
They're fine.
But it's funny because it wasn't consistent, because every now and again they'd be like, they would just kill the dark ones like without any fanfare, there would be that, but there'd also be like, well, they are dark, so we can kill them,
Yeah,
it was very inconsistent in that way.
So okay, I'm gonna put on my reflectitine hat here to reference our last episode. I think a big part of the philosophy in the book is based on this Kantian moral ethics, or ethical philosophy. And it's about good versus evil, and how the most important thing with deciding whether something is good or is bad is the person's intentions behind the action. And I think this is a really tough idea to get behind now, because I think a lot of public dialogue has been about how intentions don't matter, the consequences do. But I think they're kind of playing this game where the people at the top of the business have the privilege of saying, well, I was just doing what I thought was right. Mm-hmm. And then the people stuck in the middle are the ones dealing with well, you did, this had bad consequences, this hurts this person. And Anton's trying to juggle all these consequences and destiny chains in the air and try to figure out the best thing to do. And this poor guy is just the whole book. I mean, right at the end, he uses all the magic in all the world to just decide how to do the right thing.
Right.
He's trying so hard.
Not only that, but now that I think about it, it's actually pretty inconsistent that at the end, when you find out that the boss did all this nonsense just to be able to restore Olga's power because the boss was in love with Olga.
Yeah.
That's almost kind of a dark thing to do. Because if you're doing all this stuff just for your own personal gain, which it was in this case, he literally was like, yeah, well, me and Olga can't be in love unless she has the same level of power as me. So I did all this bullshit. All this, focusing on Svetlana for no reason, distracting Zebulon, getting the chalk, all this stuff just so I could, bone Olga happily.
Yeah, and not in an owl form for longer than 35 minutes a day or however long she gets.
Right. And in general, I just think the book was, hazy in that way. It definitely had I almost feel like he made up these awesome premises and then just kind of, didn't really have fully formed endings for anything and just kind of flew by the seat of his pants. Just it's cool enough, which it was. It was very cool. But it didn't have the same, when you read, the Dragon Bone Chair or, Patrick Rothfuss or something, you feel, how together the whole thing is.
Yeah.
You know? Which is not the feel that this book had.
But I think there's no good answer, is what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And I get why people act differently in different situations. Also, that character, Maxime, the Inquisitor.
Yeah, he was cool.
A maxim is, this is another, tinfoil hat theory, but, a maxim is a rule of conduct. Mm. And it's, a thing that you always follow. So,
that's cool.
This guy, and that's another, part of the, the Kantian philosophy is, if you have an action and you can create a maxim of it, meaning that in any situation you could apply this action, it would always be good, then you know it's good. Mm. But there's really nothing like that. So all you can do is rely on goodwill, mm-hmm. people's intentions.
Yeah, that was actually kind of interesting. You're right. The psychology behind what everyone was doing was really cool. When Maxim, it's almost like the point he was making, or at least the way the book unfolded, was that no matter how right or wrong you think you are, it's never really that. It's never 100% quite what you think it is, you know? Right isn't always completely right, wrong isn't always completely wrong. There's this weird gray area where everyone's just kind of well, we just have to move along, I guess, somehow, even though who knows what happened here, you know? When Maxim was the most, unswayable in his beliefs. Mm-hmm. And, he was going to kill Igor because he could tell that he was a dark magician. And that makes sense. Dark magicians need to die in his mind. All right. And then, just because Anton didn't want him to kill Igor because Igor was so young, he was well, wait a minute. Anton, even though he's not a dark magician, he's interfering with me killing a dark magician, which makes him killable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's not, I guess, necessarily wrong if you view it from that point of view. You know?
No, he had the easiest job in the whole book because
he was so unswayable.
He just knew what to do in every situation, and
right.
There's kind of a cool physical component to people's actions. The light ones couldn't do harm. They couldn't do bad things, or else it felt like they were either physically prevented from doing it, or they would have a painful consequence. They say they can't lie, and I read that to be they physically couldn't lie. I don't. Did you think the same thing, or was it more like it's against the rules for us to lie?
I got the feeling. I mean, let me think about it. Did anybody really lie?
No, none of the light magicians ever lied.
Not even the boss?
And that's why I think that's why his schemes were so convoluted, because he was like, I've got to get around all of these rules. Like, I can't act in my self-interest, but I see if I do nothing, then certain events will play out that eventually.
Oh, you're right. I guess he never did quite lie. That's true.
So he schemed a lot. So it's like, well, you didn't do anything wrong, but in the end, you got what you wanted at the expense of a lot of other people. So like, that's bad. But in their operating philosophy, that's perfectly fine.
Right. The weird thing is there wasn't even a clash between the light and the dark at all, except for in the first story, because everything else was just the boss pulling strings.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. Zebulon seems like a lot more straightforward, honestly.
He seems like a nicer guy.
Yeah. He's just kind of your run-of-the-mill dark wizard.
And that is a hilarious name, too, Zebulon. I'm
It's
like, oh
awesome.
my God, like, give me a break. You know what part I did like? This is just kind of like a tangent, but with the whole like psychological aspect of it, and I thought it was very like adult in a way. This particular part I'm about to talk about is the relationship that Maxim had with his wife. I thought that was very, very interesting. I've never quite seen something like that in a book. It just felt like really, really real, like very, very real and like dramatically correct. I think.
Oh yeah.
Almost at the level of like an Oscar like movie or something. Just like very like, you know, because he's doing all this stuff. He's going out and he's killing Dark Ones. He obviously can't tell that to his wife because she'll think that he's crazy. The wife, interestingly enough, half-heartedly accuses him of like having affairs. But the thing is she knows in her heart that he's not doing that. So that was just really, really cool. It was just human. It was like as human as like people are actually, which I don't think you usually get that many layers. Like when the wife is sitting there half-heartedly bitching at him and he's just like on the porch, just like staring out into the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just really, really cool. Cause like, it just felt so real.
When he says to her about the family, when he says, I love you, and she says, I wish you would take care of us instead of just loving us. I thought.
Oh, no. It was the opposite. He said, I take care of you.
No. He said, I love you. And she said, I wish you'd take care of us.
I think he said, I take care of you. And she said, I wish you would love us.
I'm like 99% sure. Because I was like thinking about.
No, because he was like, because afterwards, like, isn't taking care of and love the same thing?
All right, you talk for a little bit. I'm going to look this up because that part struck me as like so profound because of how selfish it is to just say, I love you. And like, you're supposed to take that person's words above like any kind of actions.
I remember it the exact opposite way. We'll see.
All right. Well, we can continue our conversation. But that idea of love as being kind of painful and manipulative comes up with Anton and Svetlana. Because he's saying, I can't fall in love. He doesn't think he can fall in love with her because he knows it's going to end. Right. And he thinks that the joy and like love is only joyful when you think it's going to last forever. And Gassari manipulates their love to get them to behave a certain way and test them.
See, that's a perfect example of what happened in a lot of the book and that psychology aspect where Anton is just constantly thinking of all these scenarios that actually have nothing to do with the real world. That was really interesting, you know, because he's like, because he's sitting there being like, all right, well, I can't get with Svetlana because Svetlana is going to be way above me and it just won't make sense for us to be together. But meanwhile, that never happens. And that happens the entire book. He's just like, Zebulon's thinking this, Zebulon's doing that, but Zebulon's not doing anything. So that's kind of cool. That's different, you know? Because as a reader, you're just like, yeah, Zebulon is doing that. But then you realize that, like, it's all bullshit and none of that's happening.
Yeah.
You know?
He, and the questioning is one of the things that they define as being a light other, is that you never stop wondering if what you're doing is right. And you never actually feel like you're a good person because you're always wondering what the next scenario is going to come along. Whereas a dark other just behaves however they want, and then they're like, that's it.
Right.
I felt like that at the time.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about Anton. Well, I'm furiously looking for this passage because I know I'm right.
Not right.
I wanted to talk about Anton because even though I've read the series many, many times, I've never really liked him.
Oh.
And this time reading,
He is kind of unlikable.
This time reading it, I was really paying attention to like, what are Anton's good qualities and like why does he come off like such a wet blanket?
That's the thing, is he's always bitching. That's his only problem. Like everyone else is just chilling, like even when they're at the cookout and stuff, like everyone's having a good time. And Anton's like, but what are we gonna do? Because we'll never be able to fall in love. And what is the boss planning? And everyone's just like, Anton, you know.
They're like, we're off the clock.
We're off the clock. Just chill out.
Save it for the office, man.
Yeah.
But I think the things that I don't like about him are they sort of made me like look at my biases when it comes to like, that's the hero. Because I mean, he's indecisive. I used to read him as indecisive, and this time through I'm like, he's just really, really thoughtful. It's not that he's wishy-washy, he just is slowly processing every step of what he should be doing.
Right.
And that's good. And like he's not badass. He's very humble. He's also like constantly surrounded by people who are more powerful than he is.
Right, but he's always at the center of it for some reason.
Yeah. I think it's because the author is saying like the inquisitive mind, the person who's willing to do so much extra work to be just a little bit better. That's like who the hero of our story is. And that's the best you can hope for as a human being.
Right. Everybody around him was definitely a lot more cut and dry. Even the other members of the Light were just like, yeah, I mean, this is what I do. I'm a combat warrior. I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
That's it. You know?
Yeah. What did you think about like when people become a light or a dark other? It seems like right when they're initiated, it could go either way. There's a very small difference. And then the longer they live with themselves and their new identity, the more like strongly they become swayed.
Oh, interesting.
One way or the other.
Well, but also there's another thing that they talk about is when you first enter the Twilight, that basically decides your fate. Remember they said that?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. I mean, once again, it's a lot of it seems like it's like up to chance. Mm-hmm. And like especially Igor, like look at that. He was a blank slate. And he was leaning dark, but wasn't quite there. You know?
Do you think that you would be a light other or a dark other?
Oh, geez. I don't know. It's one of those absolute power corrupts absolutely type things. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be hard, for example, like it would be hard for you to know like what you would be like as a billionaire unless you like became one. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because you just like don't know. Like a lot of people, like you ever meet someone that's had like a huge come up and they like completely change? Like, you know. Even in, like, the small circles of, like, I mean, that's never happened to me in my actual life, but maybe even, like, think of, like, high school or middle school or something, right? Where someone goes from being, like, a complete nerdazoid to, like, all of a sudden being the most popular kid in school. Like, I've seen that before. And, like, a lot of times they become fucking tyrants. In the same way in the real world where, like, you know, I think the whole absolute power corrupts absolutely thing, it's, like, it's hard to judge these people. You know, like people are always like, oh, this celebrity, like they're a douchebag. It's just hard to judge unless you're like Quentin Tarantino. You know what I mean? Because if you're walking around your whole life being Quentin Tarantino, like that existence is so different from the life that me and you lead. It's hard for us to judge him, I think.
Quentin Tarantino wrote like a one-liner for this book.
Oh, he did?
He called it a story of epic proportion.
Oh.
I should have told you that before I gave the book to you because you like Quentin Tarantino.
A story of epic proportion.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read the others as being all that powerful.
Oh, come on.
Because
they constantly talked about how powerful they were. They were like, we're awesome. Humans are weak. They'd literally be like, well, you know us. I mean, what did they say?
But they can't do anything.
Well, the dark one. Well, right, because they're in the treaty.
Yeah.
They can do like kind of minor things, or else,
Yeah.
and if they step out of bounds, it'll be. You're right. They literally can't do anything.
Like they can do like the most. They can only do things that are very inconsequential.
It's so funny. The whole entire thing is just nonsense. Just people being in their own heads, thinking this way and that way about it. It's just very psychological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, they're basically human. Like they're basically humans.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that the book was very, very interesting. Very different. Yeah. I personally didn't love it as much as you did, just because I like it when you feel this like powerful togetherness in a work.
Yeah.
Like the Patrick Rothfuss stuff and like Name of the Wind and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You know, and The Watchmen or whatever. Like most of the stuff we've done has had this like powerful togetherness. You know?
It's most similar, I thought, to The Witcher, which
Yes.
is by like another.
Because that wasn't quite as together either. It was kind of just rambly and kind of like just the coolness of the certain elements of the story is what draw you in, rather than like the powerful plot. Yeah.
And it's funny that he's a Russian author. Like Night Watch is a Russian book, and The Witcher was written by a Polish author. And I thought it was interesting that they're both like very steeped in internal conflict and philosophical lessons.
No, you're right. They had similarities, that's for sure.
And this book also makes a period joke. our second book to reference a period. When Olga's like, then they switch bodies, and she's like, "Hey, you're lucky. If it were next week, I'd have to give you some extra. I'd have to put some pads in your purse."
That was good.
That's it.
It also reminded me of when they were hanging out with Regis getting drunk, when they were all at the lake house getting drunk. So that was cool too.
Yeah,
just to put those two together.
You think like something's gonna happen, it doesn't,
and nothing
They're
happens.
Just hanging out.
Yeah.
Anton's
cool.
just being kind of a dweeb.
Yeah, as usual.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what we're gonna do next time.
What are we gonna do next time?
Come on, that giant book that's like.
Oh, you're decided?
I think we should do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to start the Stormlight Archive by Brian Sanderson.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
The first book is The Way of Kings. The Way of the Kings. I think it's The Way of Kings.
The Way of Kings.
It's incredible. It's 1,500 pages long. The font is tiny.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But that's a cool, very modern high fantasy epic. So it'll be different from Night Watch.
Nice. I'm excited.
Me too.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Next time.